The special budget workshop meeting is going on January 28th, 2021. I would like to call the Flint Board of Education Special Budget Workshop meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. Board members, as I call your name, please reply present for the public record. Vice President Perry,
Present.
Secretary Green, Treasurer McIntyre,
Present.
Assistant Secretary Treasurer Ellis McNeil,
Present.
Board Trustee Walker,
Present.
Board Trustee Wright,
Present.
and myself, President McIntosh, is present. Board members absent is Secretary Green.
I'm here.
I didn't hear you say present.
No,
Okay,
I'm here now.
all members are present. At this time, the board will hear any comments from the public. The public is reminded that they may raise their hand to speak or submit comments in the chat section. Also, anyone who sent an email prior to today's meeting will have that read. Members of the public are reminded that the Board of Education, by its bylaw 1370, are not obligated to answer questions, make statements or comments, and respond to issues raised by the public. In general, such issues will be referred to the superintendent for investigation, study, or recommendation. At this time, I will ask Stephen if anyone has raised their hand, submitted a comment, or sent an email. It may take them a moment, so please be patient.
Good afternoon, board. There are currently no hands raised or questions or any emails that were received to the board email.
Okay, thank you. The public is reminded that you may submit your comments by email to FBOE@flintschools.org to have them read at the next meeting. Thank you. At this time, I will turn the floor over to Superintendent Stewart to advise the board of the format and flow of the evening's budget workshop discussion. Superintendent Stewart.
Good afternoon, board members.
Good afternoon.
At this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mrs. Ayana Dumpre, our Director of Finance.
Good evening, board. So this evening, what we are going to do is I'm going to provide you with some information. As discussed in previous meetings, we are charged with developing an enhanced deficit elimination plan. We have to do an update to what was approved by the state before. So we have set up 2 workshops in order for us to present information, discuss ideas, and come up with an enhanced deficit elimination plan. We have this meeting this week and one more next week. The goal is to have enhanced deficit elimination plan approved at the February 17th board meeting. So, with that, I would like to get started. Okay. Please let me know, can you all see my screen?
Could you make it larger, please?
Yes, I'm gonna do my best. I'm trying to move you guys. Okay. Is that better, Miss Perry?
Could you go a little bit more? And
Okay,
I've got my readers on.
I'm gonna try to go a little bit bigger. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So in our last meeting, a few board members raised that they wanted to know about data as far as what students were within our boundaries and where they went to school. So Baird prepared some information to me and we submitted it on the board portal for you all to have access to. And I'm just kind of going over that tonight so you can see it. So what this is showing is that in 2010, how many students were enrolled in the district, how many students were non-resident, how many we lost. Is there a question? Okay. And then what the net loss is to show how many students were living within our boundaries. So I'm showing this from 2010 over to current 2020. So you can see that this number has been steadily declining for several years. And this is where we are now. And these numbers are FTE. So this shows you that for 2020, there are 13,000 students that live in our district and 10,722 go to another school. They don't go to Flint. On this next slide, the information here is showing you what schools these children are going to. So every year you can see that these are the top 11 schools, and then these are some of the smaller, top 10 schools, I apologize, and then 11 below is showing the other and how they're broken down to some smaller, in smaller areas. So you can see over time where our students appear to be going that are not in our district anymore. So if I make it smaller, you won't be able to see the numbers, but with it being so large, you can't necessarily see the schools on the side. But you guys get a gist of what I'm trying to present to you? Okay. The next slide is showing by grade level the students that we're getting from other districts and the students that are leaving our district. And you can see here, I'm trying to work within the sides here. You can see that our kindergarten students that we are losing, that number is growing. And you see where we are in 2020. We lost 1,077 kindergartners. And this is just showing you here by grade, all the students that are leaving our district. And this is just the net of the two of what we gain and what we've lost. And so then here we're just showing the number of students per building for 2020 based on the head count that we had.
I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand, but is this all on, this is all on the portal? Is this all available to the public?
So this is information that we put on the board portal for you all to have because this was requested at our last financial workshop where we were talking about the budget, about the EDAP. So what I wanted to share next was what the EDAP looks like right now. This is what I shared again back in December, January. Time is going so fast now. What the EDAP looked like currently with no changes. With the way that our district is set up right now, this is the budget we have going right now, and there are no changes. What the EDAP, what our deficit looks like for years to come. So this is showing you right now for 21-22, we would go into deficit next year based upon the expenses and the revenue that we have right now. And for 21-22, it shows that we would have like a loss trying to keep up with our trend, losing 200 students. And what that does, that shows us immediately going into a deficit next school year. And what it also shows is what that deficit looks like every year, consistently growing all the way out to 2031. We would be at a negative $85 million in deficit. We would be $85 million in deficit by 2031. This looks just a little bit different because we figured out there were some errors in the spreadsheet and some formulas, so we fixed it. And so because what I had originally showed you was going to be 90 million. So, you know, it's 85 million is what it'll look like.
I have a question.
Yes. I'm sorry, I can't see your hands raised. So
Well,
go right ahead.
I guess I'm kind of confused because when we did our the original deficit plan, it didn't, the numbers were not that high. And so I guess I'm not understanding how we ended up getting in a situation with a much larger deficit when we did most of what was required in the previous plan, and we had the bond proposal to pass, which was also supposed to address some of our debt. So what happened?
So with this fiscal stability bond, that is paying off the debt that we already had. So we
Right.
just basically restructured it and we were paying off that debt. So that bond is paying that debt. This is not any of that debt in this budget. This is strictly our operations. And realistically, the reason why we have a fund balance of $11.8 million to start the school year off is because of some of the proceeds from the bond, and majority was from the ESSER funds that we received. So that's why we didn't immediately have a deficit. So I believe the original budget had shown that the projection was supposed to be we were going to be in deficit starting off this year if we hadn't had the ESSER funds.
Okay, so my next question is, what, well, I know that part of this has to do with the loss of students, but where are the other areas where we are going into a deficit in the budget? I mean, where is it in here that we're creating this kind of overspending? Where is this occurring?
So I want to show you I was going to show you another spreadsheet where I have broken out what our state aid is by building and based upon the number of students that are in each building. And it would show you, then I wanted to show you all the expenses that each building has to cover. So with Eisenhower, you can see that their enrollment, this enrollment is what was as of October the 7th of 2020, which is what our state aid is based upon for this fiscal year. And I also want to note that our state aid for fiscal year 2021 is based upon a super blend, which is supposed to aid districts with declining enrollment so that we don't feel the truth be told, the harsh effects of losing students and because we're in a pandemic. So they pretty much giving us a little bit of grace and spreading the loss out, basically deferring it. So with Eisenhower having 194 students and with the state aid being 8326, which includes both local property tax and the state aid we get from the state of Michigan, they generate $1.6 million for them. But you can see with the amount of teachers and staff, and this is special ed, that their personnel expense alone is $1.5 million just in people. Then what you see is by the time we put in the supplies and you add in all the other costs that are required, that they actually spend $2.2 million. And so they are over by 600,000, just one building by itself.
Ayana, this is sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I have a quick question as it relates to some of the other expenses. You mentioned the pandemic, and I know our schools haven't been fully operational since we've been virtual. Have there been any savings with us being in a virtual format?
So not the only savings for sure that we had was transportation, and that was where we negotiated some savings with them. We have to still pay all of our staff, and we still have to pay water bills, electric bills, heating bills. We still have to maintain our contracts. We still have to pay all these expenses that are listed here.
Thank you.
And even still, that would be like a one-time savings. That's not something that we can say once we go back to school or even for next school year that you won't have those expenses. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep, I got you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the other? The line
The
item.
other includes advertisement, workers' comp, these things listed here. That's what other is comprised of.
Hi, this is Alice McNeil. I got a question if we go back and look at Eisenhower.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and there was a big conversation about them at one point. We have only 94 students. Then how many teachers and do we have over there with just 194 students? You know, when you're looking at your teachers, your payroll, and I worked at taught at homes, and so when your enrollment down, do you see a decline in any of these expenses? Your teachers, your LSS, your payroll, because you got 194 students, and we're showing that your special ed seem to take up a big portion of this money. So are we saying that 100% of these kids of that 194 kids are special ed?
No, 100% of the kids are not special ed. I'm unfortunately, Ms. McNeil, I cannot answer that question right now of how many teachers there are at Eisenhower. I apologize, I don't have that information available to me right at this moment, but I could get that. I can get back with you with that.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it, because I would say like we need to do some type of comparison study that if that school were at the regular capacity, how many teachers did we need it? Then we're down at one of the lowest. It's at 194. Then we got another school, Pierce, at 141. So then, but you see that the revenue, the expense is kind of high. So sometimes we might have to look back and see what is that going wrong that keeping these expenses so high when we losing kids like we're losing them.
So I have the executive director of HR, Cassandra, is on the line. Cassandra, can I defer to you that you can answer that question for Ms. McNeil, please?
Absolutely. Good evening, board. So to answer your question, Ms. Ellis McNeil, we went through a process of looking at all of our schools based upon our student membership and right sizing the teacher service in accordance with that. So to your point, there will be a reduction, although albeit maybe slight in that area, but of personnel costs. But with Eisenhower, they currently have 15 teachers on staff. Eisenhower was at, we're 2 teachers over. And so as we looked at the numbers to make sure that we took into consideration the classroom max, but most importantly, the programming of what the scholars need, it resulted in a reduction of 2 positions that will be removed from teacher service. And one of those were a vacancy, so it would not be impacting anyone as far as them leaving the district.
So if we're looking at this enrollment, pretty much the building is empty. You only got 194 students. Am I making sense? You know, we're operating a building with only 194 students, and it doesn't look like it's set up to even take care of itself. That's what I was looking at.
Yes, ma'am. That is an accurate statement. So you can also see just going across. So I want you to understand, like I said, this is literally just state aid. This does not take grants into consideration because grant income and grant expense will net each other out. And so therefore, this is not including any grant funds. This is only what general fund is paying using state aid. So I just wanted to continue to go so you can see each. Is that a question? So you can continue to see each building so that you can get an idea of where we are by building. So this is Freeman. So you can see, yes, one thing I want to note is that we special education students, we have to educate them. So even if we did some different reductions, we still make sure we have to have the proper staffing levels for special ed or LSS students. So now you can see each school. This school is positive. And that's Nethercutt. And here's Pierce with 141 students. That's their state aid. The personnel is at 1.3. And then here's the rest of the expenses that are necessary. And you'll see that they are over.
What are the administrative costs? What's included in that?
So in the admin, you have your salaries here by department. And then we have our, you have these expenses here for operations, HR, IT. We have adult ed in here. So then you'll have, we have maintenance here and snow and insurance. And then our operations includes the water and electrical bills and heat. For operations, you have the other things that's necessary for the operations department to function with some different maintenance, costs, different supplies, smaller tools that are necessary in operations. In business, we have to pay for our payroll person that's outsourced and a few other expenses that are in here.
What's board? What's line? What's 20?
So we have the other expenses that are attributable to the board. We have contracted services in there. We have other purchase services that relate to the board. Can show you exactly. We have lobbyists, marketing, conferences, contracted services, supplies, dues and fees, miscellaneous expenditures.
So Ms. Dumpre, I'm sorry, it's Ms. President McIntosh. So we did not see any savings in our utility bills, although our students were at home, or how did that pan out? Because we shouldn't have used as much water and electricity, things of that nature, if no one's in our.
So I would have expected the same thing, Mrs. McIntosh, but we still have to pay water bills every month, and we still have electricity bills. What I have discovered is that some buildings are on a budget plan with consumers. And I don't know if you're familiar with a budget plan, but it's where you're supposed to pay the same amount all year round so that it's more of a smoothing. Yeah. And so a lot of buildings are on a budget plan.
Okay. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. So yes.
Sorry, this is Adrian again. I have another question, and I hope this doesn't take us down an alternative path. But as we're talking about the budget, especially maybe this year and next year, I wondered if we had any insight as it relates to what the governor announced for school districts that would be receiving, I believe it's close to $2 billion statewide, but you mentioned a weighted formula for school districts, especially in urban areas like ours. Do we have any insight about the funding that potentially we may be receiving and how that may interact with our budget in terms of how it could be used?
So I believe you said I'm trying to hear, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you, Mr. Walker. So you asked about 2 million, or are you referring to ESSER 2 funds? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No. I was just mentioning what the governor had mentioned in terms of money being allocated for school districts, and I believe this was totally towards the reopen cost by March 1st. But she mentioned again $2 billion, and within that funding, she mentioned that it would be a weighted formula that school districts across the state would receive, and urban school districts like ours would potentially receive more. I just didn't know if you all had received any communication from the state about those funds and how those funds will relate to our budget.
So what you're referencing is what we refer to as ESSER 2 funds, and we are supposed to receive a allocation based upon our title funding. We don't have an exact figure just yet. We've heard ranges from 33 million to possibly 49 million. But what I want to reiterate with that is that those funds are on a reimbursement basis. So even if they allocated, let's just say, for example, $33 million to us, that means we have to spend $33 million and then request reimbursement of the $33 million. So the information that we have thus far is that potentially we will only have until September 30th of 2022 to spend that money, and for sure we don't know exactly how much it is, and we have to ensure that the expenses adhere to the guidelines and the restrictions that they give us for how we can spend the money. So right now it's just a guess. Say that again?
We haven't got those guidelines yet, correct?
Correct. That is correct. This is as well as not having our actual allocation amount.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. So I wanted to be able, that was actually one of the things I was going to mention, is that, as I mentioned earlier, that we received $6 million. We received ESSER funds from last school year, and it was $6 million that was attributable into our final budget from last year. And that is what is essentially helped us not be in deficit. But again, we have to spend the money first and then get reimbursed. So one of the things that is saving us, of course, is the ESSER from last year. It is the super blend that I mentioned. And so in FY22, we don't know for sure how much we're going to get for ESSER, and then what the requirements and restrictions and guidelines are on them. And then we don't know if the traditional formula for calculating our state aid will be as generous as it was this year. If it is not generous, we will definitely have less in state aid for next year, simply because we have a lower enrollment for the fall. So if we wanted to be able to be successful with perhaps utilizing ESSER, depending on how much it is that we get, the way for us to be successful is that we must do some structural changes and realign our expenses so that we can be viable in the future, even if we're able to receive those ESSER funds.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The Republican side of the legislature, since they are the majority here in the state, they are threatening to withhold dollars from basically the public schools if the governor does not give up her powers. Are we looking at that? Because I mean, they haven't set a time period, but are we looking at that and the possibility of them withholding dollars, and that could throw us into a tailspin? Do you have any information on that? Have you heard anything?
No, ma'am. This is the first time I've heard of that, unfortunately.
Okay, it's been all over the news.
Ms. Dumfrey, yep, it's been on the news today, as well as I have a contact from the governor's office who often calls me anytime anything comes out Gary Jones. He's been very helpful with keeping me up to speed of what's happening in the governor's office. And so, yes, that threat is out there. And the other threat that's out there that he shared with me is the Republicans, they're threatening to hold money for any schools that are not offering an in-person session by March 1st. And so those are two things that they're kind of wrestling with right now. And so I was made aware of that information earlier today.
I have another question for Ms. Dunpray.
Yes, ma'am.
A minute ago, you talked about we would need to realign or restructure our expenses. Can you kind of give more information about what that would look like?
So, well, what I'm sharing here is showing that majority of our buildings do not, they can't sustain themselves. So I feel our footprint is too large for the amount of students that we have. So we need to reduce our footprint. And in doing so, that would mean that we need to reduce the amount of buildings that we have open to help us facilitate that.
Okay, and the which that is correct, which I think we've known that for some time, but the downside to that is when we look to address that, it'll cause us to lose even more students because people will leave if their school is closed. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. So yeah, but okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So what I intended to do this evening was share this information with you and also provide information related to what I think is pertinent to us. And I'm open to some dialogue and some information so that we can work together to ensure that we come up with a plan that is solid and viable for us to be productive in the future and for us to be viable in the future.
So in addition to the information that you're sharing, has there been any discussion about cuts in any of those areas outside of personnel or within personnel or any of those kinds of things? What is administration looking at doing to begin to look at addressing the deficit from their end?
So as Ms. Washington mentioned, we're trying to address that we don't have too many staff for the amount of students that we have in each building. We would like to have less buildings and try and reduce our some of our expenses that we have a new RFP going out for transportation, so we can try and see if we can get better pricing for transportation. I am going to try and work with consumers to see if there's something that we can do to try and reduce our electric bills, but short of actually closing some buildings, that is where we're going to get the most bang for our buck.
Okay. So and I guess this question is for Mrs. Washington. How often do you look at staffing for the possibility of reductions or increases? Because I know in the past, if school started in August and October, we were cut to the bone. So, they looked at the numbers and then decided how you would either gain or lose depending on what your enrollment is. So is that process still followed?
Yes, ma'am. We look at it in May towards the end of the school year in preparation for the next school year so that we can account for attrition and if there's going to be any type of program expansion or grade expansion so that we'll know how to prepare for bringing on or transitioning staff. Then we look at it again in August after school has started to see exactly how many staff have returned because sometimes we get retirements or resignations right at the end of July. And so we look at process them for that month. So we look at it again in August. And then we look at it right at October, towards the end of September, beginning of October in preparation for the count window. And we track it through that window in order to determine if we need to make reductions based upon student membership.
Okay, thank you.
So, Miss Wright, I also want to let you all know that if you look at another district that's closer to ours, is if you look at the size of Carmen, they have about 5,200 students, and they have 4 elementary schools, and 1 middle school and 1 high school. And we have 3,200 kids, and we have 8 elementaries, and 1 middle, 1 high school. So just showing in comparison of size of some, a district close to us and showing their footprint versus ours and their students versus ours.
Right. I clearly understand what you're saying. I clearly get it. I get it. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? I do have Baird on the phone with me as well. If there's any other data you want us to provide, tell me what you want from me so I can.
I have a question on line number 29. It's
Yes,
going
ma'am.
blank all the way across. Look at line number 29. You got
That's athletics. And we only have athletics at the high school. And so that's where all of the expenses are attributable to. That's what school is attributable to.
342,000. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
So, Ms. Dunpray, do you have any insight from the state as to how they're responding to this deeper deficit?
So, I have bi-weekly calls with the state, and we kind of go over our finances and where we are on a weekly basis, and what we expect to happen on a week-to-week basis. And I asked the question of, are you all, what is the state's position with us? And, they said they want to be a partner with us. They want to be supportive. If we can tell them what we need, they are more than willing to help us to be successful. They are also, they have a reimbursement grant that they do, and it's about to come out in another week where we can request assistance from them. And we have to, provide justification why we need this assistance to help us make some changes or to help us get some data that we need to help us make changes. And they're very willing to assist us.
So did you tell them we need about 15 million?
I mean, I can tell them Mrs. Wright, but I don't foresee them just opening up the checkbook.
That was just some budget humor.
I appreciate that.
When's the deadline to request this assistance?
I beg your pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't figure out how to raise hands. Do we just talk?
Okay,
Neither can I.
Yeah, I'm just asking, when is the deadline to request this assistance from the state?
so they're gonna, they're supposed to send out an application. We were just on the phone with them today, and the district administrator said it should come out in a week. And it's not the kind of assistance that will be $15 million in nature, but it's assistance that will, if we need to have maybe a different consultant to help us to come up with a plan to help with our enrollment. They have a grant available right now to help us to view why we have challenges with enrollment. And so we can apply for that grant, and they'll help us to look into what things are causing us to have declining enrollment. So it's that kind of assistance to help us.
When's the deadline?
Well, they haven't submitted it, they haven't provided it yet, so I can't tell you the deadline. So they're supposed to send something out within a week is what she told me. And then I'll be able to have the deadline at that time.
I mean, you don't have the specific deadline, but what's the window? Like, is it like in a month? Is it?
Oh yeah, it's not, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. It's not like we get a year, it'll be like within maybe 30 days that we'll be able to fill out that information and turn it around and submit it to them and provide our support for why we need that assistance.
What does everyone else think? I mean, do we need more consulting and studies done about why we have declining enrollment? I mean, is that a question? I'm sorry, I'm kind of confused because I think it's very clear, but that's the only assistance this program would have, is kind of to hire outside third-party people to come in and do some kind of a study, right?
So, I don't see that. I
Miss,
didn't want to cut anybody out. So I'll wait.
Miss
Go ahead, Miss Wright.
I think Miss Perry was speaking.
I'm sorry.
Yep. You said Mr. Baird is online?
Yes, ma'am. Connor and Navneet from Baird is online.
Oh, okay. It's still. Last year, I think it was, you all gave us a report. I guess what I'm asking, what do you see as our, being an urban district, is this happening in all the urban districts, or is this just germane to us?
Connor, can you respond to her?
I can. This is Brian Luffler with Robert W. Baird. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Brian.
Hello, board. It's good to see you. Happy New Year. One of the things that the board member Perry, the answer is yes. Another urban district down I-75, Pontiac Schools, had been experienced the same thing. Probably in the last 5 years, 6 years, they from 2009, they saw a dramatic drop every year. They're about stabilizing in terms of plateauing in terms of what the kids are. So one of the suggestions that we had offered, and definitely with the Department of Treasury's assistance, the reason that the study would be helpful is possibly allowing you to see where the students that are living within your boundaries and attending your district. What would be helpful is that there could be a study of how do you preserve to make sure that if there is a school closure, which one stays open, there's essentially a matching of attendance to the location to a school. And then in addition, there could be, you could have a cost associated with the building per square foot and things like that. So that's a little bit more robust than what we probably put together here for your review today. But again, as we had talked to the administration earlier, we are waiting for the state to open up this grant reimbursement program, and they would fund these dollars to pay for outside vendors to give you the report that you need. And then also, historically, that was also the process that the Michigan Department of Treasury had used with other school districts, even with Pontiac or even with Benton Harbor as well, of urban districts that are essentially seeing student loss at a dramatic pace. So that would be good information from, you know, third parties. And then two, as we mentioned, is this is again a cost that the Michigan Department of Treasury would be more than happy to reimburse.
So with speaking on Pontiac, have they begun to turn the corner? Have they turned the corner? And if they did, what are some of the things that they did to help turn that corner?
One of the things, you know, and given the fact Baird did work, we've been with Pontiac Schools since their consent agreement with the state in 2013. What they did do is sell facilities and essentially got rid of buildings, looking at where was the best location to preserve. And so that was one. Two, if there were buildings that needed some type of improvement, similar to what you have done, is where you have your sinking fund program, where you made sure that your building was operating a little bit more efficiently, so you can have savings associated with that in the general fund. They did that as well. Pontiac's, essentially their student population has stabilized, and in 2020, they were actually able to go out and do a bond issue to do some of the do a capital improvement plan to stabilize, or at least make sure that the buildings were safe, secure, accessible, and provide equity in each of the buildings, so that if there was not a library or the right size of a cafeteria, or a multi-purpose room, they addressed that. They also addressed needs both at the junior high and then also at the high school. But that was after 5 years of essentially dealing with just kind of the sinking fund project that they did. And their biggest concern was like roofs. They didn't have thermal controls in their buildings. If you remember, at the year that we had the vortex, I want to say it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, they actually had a couple of their buildings pipes bust because there was no heat in their buildings. So things like that.
Okay, so I know everybody's using pandemic, but I've got to say this. For years, we have been losing students, but now we're in the pandemic, and no, I don't see, and you have companies that are closing, going bankrupt. I don't see anyone buying our buildings. I would rather see the money being spent to raise the buildings, and then you make green areas. And someone may want to buy a green space, but no one wants to buy in my opinion, no one wants to buy some land that has a 70-year-old building sitting there, and then they also have to raise it to do what they want. Because I'm quite sure our buildings have been, the insides are awful. We've got vermin all over the place, so no, that's going to be impossible. So don't you think it would make better sense for us to try to raise the buildings instead of selling off that area, those buildings or land, whatever you want to call it? Wouldn't it be smarter to do that, and that would generate money?
Yeah, that's an option in terms of the purchase price that you would receive for the land. Essentially, there would be a cost to do that as well. I do know that at one point in time, there was dollars through the MSHDA, Michigan State Housing Development Authority, that the City of Highland Park schools used to raise their high school that was on Woodward Avenue. So that they essentially had the same type of concept of where for economic development. Again, this is a plan where, there's other tools in the toolbox for, say, local units of government. So, for example, the city, if there was an entity that wanted to do the building and they wanted to raise it, that is going to be a project that, if they do a brownfield plan, if you've heard those before, where that cost of demolition and any site cleanup is an eligible or reimbursable expense. But for your perspective, it would impact the cost of what you receive of the parcel, so to speak. But it's a collaboration of making sure that where's the city going to want to be with the development of where your schools are, but also what is the condition of every school. So that could certainly be assessed. And if I recall correctly, Bear did write the property, the plan to sell the property in Pontiac schools and how that was done. But we can certainly share that again, but we did circulate that around last year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome very much.
And I'm sorry, who is this speaking? I'm just trying.
It's Carol.
Sure.
Hello.
So my name is Brian Loeffler. I'm a managing director with the firm Robert W. Baird. Also on the phone with me are two fellow associates, Connor Sullivan and Navneet Adi. And the three of us focus, and Navneet used to work at the Michigan Department of Treasury in the Office of, Navi, I keep forgetting the name, Office of School, OFSRA, what's the school?
The school
Yes,
accountability.
it's the Office of School Review and Fiscal Accountability.
So things that she used to review deficit elimination plans for other schools. So she's a great new team member on our team to have, and Navneet started with us on September 1st. Connor also does a lot of our quantitative. But Baird is engaged as the school district's municipal advisor. And what that means is that when the administration or you meet with the people at the Department of Treasury, we would be more than happy to sit with you, prepare you for those meetings. As a municipal advisor, we have a fiduciary duty to the school district, and our goal is always to provide you with options for your consideration. The board is the decision maker, but we can certainly quantify any cost-benefit analysis, taking into account what we've seen across this state, and then also as it relates to school funding, or in terms of tax base and the things that you're all familiar with, we would certainly be able to provide you input on that as well.
Okay, I have a question. Do we have any potential buyers for any of these buildings, these school buildings?
Ms. McNeil, that's not something that we have explored at this time. I believe last year when they were working on the EDEP, there was some research that went into having buyers for some buildings, but we have not explored that this year.
And I can speak to, we've had two offers. We've had two offers this year. And the two offers that we've had were basically, they wanted the buildings for free. And then when you asked them for a plan of how they're going to maintain the building, they didn't really have a plan of how they were going to maintain the property. And so those two offers are back with the individuals who submitted the offers, because we need to know how they're going to maintain the buildings, because we've had a couple times where people have offered to buy a building, they couldn't maintain the building, and that came back to Flint Community Schools. And so we want to make sure that they have a solid plan of how they're going to maintain the buildings before that offer is moved any further.
Okay, and the second part is that, have we looked at Detroit? You know, Detroit was kind of in a bind, but they're a big, larger city than we are. But however, they was able to turn their school district around in a positive way. So have we kind of looked at that model and streamlined that model down to where we could use something out of it?
So the Detroit school situation is what we call old co, new co concept. They were essentially, through the legislature, they were essentially able to kind of just charter their school district and essentially leave the debt associated with the old school behind, which is then being paid by the non-homestead millage and an emergency loan and things like that. So that option, was not, may not be available, but it doesn't mean that we can't certainly ask in terms of that process. I do know that in 2020, by June 30th of last year, what's been greatly appreciated in terms of the plan is having the voters approve the fiscal stability bond that was approved in March of 2020, create a dedicated revenue source to repay the bonds that were issued and closed, I think on June 28th of 2020. The proceeds of that money went to pay off a considerable amount of your debt and also your audited deficit at that time. And then that's going to be paid off over time. And that was required the state treasurer's approval, and that was done pursuant to state law. So I think what we're trying to do as well is, look at other options as well. If Detroit is that, or if there's something that's related to a fiscal stability bond again. But the concern about the second fiscal stability bond is the additional millage or additional dedicated millage. If for those who were part of the 2020 financing, what had happened is that the school district took their aggregate amount of millage that was for your sinking fund, and that was then repurposed into millage to pay for the bond issue and still to provide dollars for sinking fund purposes, so that the tax rate to the taxpayer was the same. It was just a reallocation of the revenue.
Well, then it just goes back to what Ms. Perry was saying. The best concept in my, way she was thinking, green space sell better than having a building sitting on it. And that was probably one of the goals of the master plan, is that company like Amazon, a company come here that wants to buy into Flint, they don't want to buy into an abandoned building, tear the building down, costs more money. So we kind of have to keep that ideal on the table. It's an excellent idea that if we had nice, clean green space, then we'll get rid of that ugly site and that burden. But those are pros and cons.
Yes, and I think for those who are familiar with that in the city of Detroit, voters approved a bond issue in around $250 million, and most of the purpose of that money is to go into the neighborhoods for blight remediation. In other words, provide dollars to essentially, tear down houses, have a green space, take the empty lot, see if it's sold, sell it to the next for a new house or to the adjacent parcel. But the whole purpose there is that they've learned that an empty house is worse than having nobody in a house at all. So, but those are options. But the funding source for Detroit was that they had to get a voted bond issue to do that.
Okay. And also, didn't Detroit also do a public charter school? Took one of their school and turned it into a public private, not a public charter school, I'm sorry, a public charter school. Is that something that could be on the table?
Yeah, I mean, that's an option here. We could certainly take a look at that in terms of essentially, in the spreadsheet that you saw earlier, is that your dollars per pupil is right now funded from the local property tax, the 18 mills, and then also the balance from the state aid. So if I recall correctly, of your $8,200 per pupil, I think if it's like, let's call it, say 75% comes from 75% comes from state school aid, 25% from the millage, from the 18 mills. Yeah, if you essentially quote charter your entire district, then the 18 mills that you levy for non-homestead could be a revenue source for other purposes, and that's something we can certainly take a look at.
Thank you.
Good. Appreciate the ideas. Keep them coming. We will be more than happy to do a cost benefit.
I have another.
I'm not.
I'm sorry, Miss President. I'm sorry, Miss
want.
President McIntosh. When you're done, I'd like another comment, please.
Yes, ma'am. If I could recall, we try not to give our buildings to other schools because of the competition. situation and how we lose our students, I didn't think that we sold our buildings to charter schools, or I read or heard that somewhere that we try not to do that. And I also wanted to ask, have we looked to advertise our vacant buildings outside of the area? Have we did like a national attempt to sell our buildings?
Well, President, I don't think we've done any marketing or advertising for our buildings in the area or outside of the area as far as selling them.
And board members, again, this is Brian Leffler. That option could be done, similar to what we had done for the Pontiac schools, is that we had identified each building, the parcel, gave the statistics, and then that what you could do is ask the Department of Treasury to do the RFP, to have a licensed broker, and that your costs up front to sell it, and that they would pay for that initial, listing and all the prep work that a commercial banker may be needed. So like a CBRE or a JNL or some other firm that would essentially, do national and marketing on that as well. So it can be done, and it's been done before.
Yeah, and so board president, the board members would decide, vote on which buildings it is that they would want to sell. And then if you guys can move forward with the marketing and advertising of those buildings, both in the area and outside of the area. As we do have a lot of vacant buildings, I believe it's 22 buildings that we're not utilizing. Ms. Dumpray, is it 22 buildings that we have that are just sitting vacant?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would think if we were really trying to rid ourselves of these buildings, then that would be the first thing we would want to do, is seriously let it be known to everyone who may be interested that they are for sale. And like he had come up with how much we want for each building, and then put it out there. I mean, and then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. So is it the board's desire for all of the vacant buildings to be sold? What is the board's desire? I guess that's something that, we would need to know, so that we know how to move forward on what it is that the board's wishes.
Okay. Well,
President McIntosh,
yes, Ms. Wright. You recognize
remember we formulated a committee last year to look into all of that, and that committee included you, Mrs. McIntosh, myself, and Attorney Williams, and we got started, and then the pandemic arose and we didn't go any further, because the point was to kind of focus on that a little separately so that it wouldn't be a drain on the superintendent's time. So I don't know if you want to move forward with that or not.
Okay, Ms. Wright, then you're right. I remember we started that with your central piece. You're right. I guess you and I should have a conversation and determine how we'll move forward, and include the board and superintendent somewhere in there, and figure out which buildings we're going to get rid of. There's no need for us to keep talking about it if we're not advertising the buildings. Nobody's going to know what we're selling, what we want for it. If we're serious about getting rid of these buildings, then we have to be prepared to sell them. So that's all. I'm finished. Thank you.
President McIntosh, this is Adrian. I'm sorry if I'm cutting somebody off. I just have a really quick question in regards to that statement. I know you all mentioned that there's 22 buildings that we have within our purview that could potentially be sold. Is there a list somewhere of those buildings that could be shared just for awareness? I just don't know what the 22 buildings are.
Pray, do you have that information tonight? The 22 buildings?
I would need to stop presenting so I can search for it, but I have it.
Okay.
And you can send it whenever. I don't need to see it now. I just wanted to see if that's something that could be sent. I'm sorry again for cutting somebody off.
Okay, you're excused,
you're fine.
Mr. Walker. But the other thing is that You know, one of the things as a board, I know in the past, we really don't like the discussions about closing schools, and I in particular, that's a heartbreaker for me. But clearly, that discussion is going to have to be brought up again. So, in preparation for that discussion, I would like to request some information. Superintendent Stewart and Mrs. Domprey, I would like to know from all of the schools, how many of the students at each of our schools that are open, in particular, well, the elementary schools, it's not necessary for the junior and high, but for the elementary schools, I would like to know how many of the students who attend those schools actually live in that school's attendance area, and how many students are bused in from other attendance areas, and from those that are bused in, what is their actual, well, yeah, what is their attendance area that they're being bused to? Because I think bused from, because I think the hard decision to be made is going to be keeping the schools open where the students are.
Right.
So if that information could be prepared for me or all board members, if they're interested in having it, so that when we start having these discussions, we will have some hard data to look at as we begin those conversations.
So I will try to have that information for you for next week, because I know we have to have an amended EDEP by February. And so I will try to gather that information and have that information for you for the board workshop next week.
Okay, thank you. Well, if it's possible, can you get it before, so that we can have looked over that information before the meeting starts?
This is a huge task to undertake in 1 week, but I'm going to give it my all, and have my staff to give it their all to get the information to you as soon as possible. I mean,
Okay,
we're looking at, we're looking at 8 elementary schools. And so that's what's going to make it, a little more difficult, because
right. Well, if that's, I don't want to put any undue pressure on you guys. So if you can have it by the next meeting, I'll be okay with that. So just forget, I withdraw my request to have it before.
And may I also add, Superintendent Stewart, Ms. Domprey, the buildings, when we get the listing of those buildings, like I said, can you be sure to have the expected sales price with each building, so that when it's time for us to advertise those buildings, or if somebody asks us, we can give them the honest dollar amount. We need to keep up with that, so that information is fresh in our mind, because if that's what we want, then I think that's where we have to set ourselves up and start asking for out the gate. And I think we need to seriously look at advertising those buildings in our area, and then going maybe statewide, and then doing something national, because we're not gonna be able to sell them if we don't put forth a serious effort to hustle and get rid of them.
So Board President, Mr. Chapman, who I don't think he's on with us, we do have appraisals for all of our buildings, but the appraisals that we have, they're not as current. And so he is in the process of working on getting updated appraisals for all of our facilities.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, Miss Wright. As soon as he gets that information together, then you guys will be able to put a compilation together for us with the current information.
You want, I'm just trying to see clarity of what you're asking me for. Will you have the appraisal cost for all of our buildings as soon as you get the information? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm saying, since you don't have the updated information, can we wait till you get the updated appraisals, and then we have all that information so we won't be redundant. Get the old information, then he's done with the new appraisals, then we get the new information. Can we just get it, the updated information in all our buildings that's for sale at one
Absolutely, ma'am.
time?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank
That's what I was referring to, that he's working on that now, and as soon as we have all of the updated appraisal information, we'll get that to you. Yes, ma'am.
Can we
Thank
have
you very
the
much.
latest appraisal? I mean, I would like to see a comparison as well. Can we have the latest appraisals that we actually do have that are ready to go, please?
So there's two different requests on the floor. I just want to make sure that I'm clear. Board member McIntyre is asking for the one now as well as the updated request. And then I heard board president say she wanted us to just wait and give you the updated appraisal request. And so I just need to know, board members, which one am I doing?
Well, I don't want, if Miss Laura thinks she needs that information, but for me, the past information is not going to benefit us any. So, but if that is her pleasure and you have that information, I guess, already written down, plug the numbers for the new information. I don't know. Is Miss Laurel, is that what you're saying? You want them to issue it twice? Can you wait till the new information come and they get it all at once, or do they?
I mean, yeah, but I would like to see a comparison, please.
Okay, how about that, Superintendent Stewart? Can we just have both sets of numbers at one time so you won't have to address this twice?
Absolutely, I have no problem with doing it. I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on what it is that that we were providing you. So yes, ma'am. Once we have the updated appraisal, then we will get you the information of all of our properties, where you will have the current appraisal price that we have now, as well as the updated appraisal, so that you have the comparison. And I'll get that all to you at one time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Superintendent Stewart, since we are doing that and for the public's sake, why don't we also put out there with that information how much it's costing us for each one of these buildings to keep them on our books? I think the public need to see that so they can get a visual what it's costing us, that we're just not making these decisions, so they can see the expense that we're incurring keeping these buildings. So maybe we can have all that information some kind of way where we don't have to keep going back and forth. We got the comparison, we got the current, and then the public can see how much it's actually costing us as taxpayers to maintain these empty buildings.
Or maybe when we have a meeting and we're actually addressing these things, they can be in our board packet available to the public. That way they won't double work the numbers and be redundant and repetitive in their. Yes. So how about that, Ms. McNeil? Can we just, when we're addressing all these things, have that in the public packet, and that way it's available to the public as well as ourselves in written document?
Mm-hmm. And then, since we're doing brainstorming, why don't we always address this question? Some of the parents are saying, why cannot Flint have a public charter academy similar to the one like in Detroit area? So we might as well be able to say, because that conversation is going to come up. So these are things I'm just throwing out there, and you can just put it whenever it needs to be.
Okay, well, let's stick to the agenda items, board. Let's get back on track because we're running. We're supposed to be till 7:30, so let's let them get the information in. All right,
sorry,
you got that, Miss Superintendent Stewart?
Yes, ma'am, Board President.
Okay, thank you.
Back to you, Mrs. Dumpre.
Back to you, Ms. Dumpre.
So this was the information that I wanted to share, and what we're doing right now with dialoguing and brainstorming and putting ideas out. This is exactly what I wanted us to accomplish. And so I want to ensure that I know exactly what to bring back to present at the next meeting that will allow us to make a decision for our EDAP. So I know we have some brainstorming ideas, and I have the information request related to the elementary buildings, and to provide that information about which students attend the schools and where they live and if they're being bused in or not. So is there any other information that you want me to bring to our next meeting that will allow us to make some decisions to put into our EDAP?
Ms. Dumpre, I think for clarity, busing in, we only bus our students who live in the area of that school, but are outside of the, it's less than a mile walk zone. So for clarity, is it students who are bused? Because I could live in Eisenhower's area and I catch the bus, but I could also live in Brownell's area and my mom drives me to Eisenhower. So is it necessarily the ones who live in the area who are being bused, or are you talking about the ones who are being transported from another school zone to a particular school?
What I was under the understanding that if a kid wanted to go to a school that we would bus them, but maybe that's old information.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm asking for is students who go to a school, but they don't live in that attendance area. So if they're not bused, so that's what I want.
Yeah, so those are our permit kids who live in a different area. So yes, we can get that for you. Yes, ma'am.
So no permit kids are bused.
No, ma'am, they are not. If you are on permit, your parent has to provide transportation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's what I need. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So Ms. Dumpre, it is the number of students who live in that area as well as the permit kids, permit scholars.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else?
I apologize, Board President. I just want to ensure if there's any additional information that the board would like for me to bring to our next meeting that would be helpful in us making some decisions for our EDAP.
I think if you can add to the list the vacant buildings, maybe if you can have that information. We may not have the appraisal cost, but at least we'll know. I think it was Board Member Walker who inquired of the vacant properties. So maybe we can have a list of the 22 vacant properties.
Okay, I can have that before the meeting if that's a requirement. So I just want to make sure if there's anything else that I need to prepare for next week. Okay. All right, Mrs. McIntosh, I will pass it back over to you. Thank you, board, for being receptive. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. We appreciate
Before
it.
we adjourn, is there anything else, Superintendent Stewart? Is that it from you as well? Nobody else?
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's all for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we adjourn, I'd like to inform the public the board's next special budget workshop meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 4th, 2021 at 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. The link for the meeting will be posted to the district's website tomorrow for the public to join the meeting. Seeing there is no further business, this board meeting is adjourned. Good night, everybody, and the time is 6:49.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.